we're going to be crossing over live to Parliament House, where we're having the vetting of the Minister Designate for the Public Enterprises Ministry. This is a niche ministry, so the vetting is so much key for the enterprises. We shall be giving you live feed for that. But in the meantime, my name is Charles Aitib. Many thanks for watching.
Enterprises, is that okay? Is interest in enterprises, because I noticed that there's some confusion going on in what should actually be public enterprises. So what would be your mandate? Would you be managing government's interest in every enterprise, or you will be overseeing just public enterprises as defined under our Constitution? Because the Constitution defines public enterprises and corporations.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I will refer your committee to the State Interest and Governance Authority Act 2019, Act 990. And in this, when we were passing this act, a provision was made for the position of the minister to be responsible for SIGA, and that is SIGA, State Interest and Governance Authority, which was created by this act. And Honorable Chair, the act, as I show a copy to you, mentions the minister responsible for oversighting SIGA, mentions it 18 times in this act, which was passed by this House. And the interpretation portion clarifies the role, the meaning of the minister in respect of this act. The 18 times mentioned gives clear and distinct of something I would call job description or role of the minister to oversight the administration, effective administration of this act as passed by this House. SIGA has been working, it's been in existence since the passing of this act and making sure that the provisions. So, SIGA has about 86 declared or specified public enterprises, and the role of this ministry is to oversight them. Some government has a minimum of 10%, some 100%, and some 20% and so on. But government interest, like you are saying, government interest in these public enterprises, I hold this ministry
Mr. Chair,
to oversight. Thank you.
So would you say that your definition of public interests, a public corporation or public corporation, is that which has been defined by the Act?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, yes.
Right. So this is not your definition, but that which is in the Act?
Yes, Chairman.
Very well. So in essence, the ministry's role will be to oversee public enterprises and to also oversee the interests of the state in other enterprises that may not necessarily be, corporations, state-owned corporations, and etc. Wherever, in any other enterprise in which the state has interest, then the ministry will be responsible, or the minister will be responsible for overseeing the management of that interest. Yeah.
Exactly so, Chairman. Yeah.
So the second part of the question.
The state of public enterprises today, as we can all identify with, include high losses. The high losses of these enterprises, indebtedness, and low productivity, low efficiency, weak governance structures also exist to ensure that they operate profitably, and also there is fragmented coordination of the government interest to oversight these enterprises. when it comes to the profitability, efficiency issues, this we all know has been a drain on government resources because government invested for returns, but that is not what is happening. That is the state now, and that presents problem to be solved. And that is what His Excellency, the President, is trying to focus attention on to make sure that this situation is addressed. Thank you, Chairman.
Immediate Chairman, with your indulgence, we have, as I've indicated, Honorable Cudjoe is one of us. My objection, I think, is fundamental. I would wish that you relate to the presidency just to give us a formal official correspondence to enable us proceed, even if it takes midnight with the correspondence from the presidency we will do. But as we proceed, there is no Ministry for Public Enterprises, and our hands are tied because we should be assessing him based on the role he's going to play at that particular sector. So, Chairman, I'm making an application to you, and your ruling, the Constitution supersedes an EI. I have said that I have no difficulty with the President exercising his mandate under Article 78, but we are vetting him for what purposes? So, Chairman, if we can, we allow us to do consultation momentarily for 5-10 minutes, but I think that you and the leadership must be reaching out to the President to provide further and better particulars for us to proceed. I'll plead with you, Chairman. Allow us 5 minutes, then I do a consultation, and then we proceed. But to Honorable Cudjoe, bear with us. We are following fidelity and respect to the law. Chairman has done
instructions. That's not the challenge. Obviously, we are discussing this. I think we have come to a conclusion.
Mr. Chair, if I may have the floor. Mr. Chair, if we give due regard to Article 78(1) with respect, quote, ministers of state shall be appointed by the President with the prior approval of Parliament from among members of Parliament or persons qualified to be elected as members of Parliament, except that the majority of ministers of state shall be appointed from among members of Parliament. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, fundamentally, the nomination by the President, the effect is that the person becomes a minister of state and not appointed to a particular ministry. I have said, and I will repeat, that the fundamental issue of clarity raised by my respected colleague is well grounded. But if you look at how it is situated, it is only in form. In substance, a minister of state has been nominated for vetting here. So the ministry has attached to it that he is saying that, look, he sees that there is some omission. To what extent does that stop us from proceeding? If the intention is to get clarity, then my view is that as Parliament, we can proceed. What we are doing now is not a finality. In fact, after voting, we will not even take a vote now, or that we are not the plenary. I therefore hold the humble view that the earlier position by Mr. Chair, that we can proceed, whilst immediate steps are taken, clarity on this matter would not, in any event, have any serious effect on our work. It would rather help us proceed as time is of the essence and as the supposed defect is not so fundamental. So I would humbly plead with the Honorable Minority Leader that it wouldn't hurt to proceed whilst the very clarity he seeks to get is pursued by the chair. After all, he is part of the leadership of this committee. So the communication will be transmitted to the appointing authority for clarity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, Chairman, my application is still before you. It's not my intention that we take sides in this national exercise, but momentarily for Honorable Cudjoe, our side will just sit and observe whilst we wait for clarity and better particulars from the presidency. We do not intend to take part in further proceedings until we receive satisfactory explanation from the office of the president. So that will be our attitude to his vetting. Thank you, Chair.
Very well. But there's this point I must make clear. I think there are certain matters which require decision by the committee. And so if we have raised issues like this, you raise it at our pre-sitting meeting or pre-sitting, we'll discuss them and take a decision. I think we should not continue to jump matters after we have brought in a nominee and sworn him for consideration. The second one is that I think it's totally inappropriate for me, sitting here as a committee chairman, to take a matter arising out of here to the presidency without going through the committee of the House. The matter is brought before us at the committee, we report to the House, and in particular instance through Mr. Speaker. I don't think I should be able to go behind the Speaker to speak to the presidency in matters like this. So let's proceed with what we can. It's noted that an objection or a question is raised as to a ministry not created, so to speak, which will be contained in our report that this matter was brought to our attention as a committee, and we draw the House's attention to it. But please, let's proceed. Yes, Honorable Bob.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I think you've made a very good point, but I suggest that we've been sitting as a committee and we've worked closely together up to this point. If we could give ourselves some 10 minutes off camera to discuss some of these issues that they've raised. Say again. We should proceed. If the chairman has ruled, fine. But I was thinking we should, because we've worked closely to this point, and this is not a matter that should break that cordiality. We should go off camera, sit and resolve this in 5 minutes. I don't think a phone call to seek clarity will spoil anything. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I strongly support the suggestion by my respected colleague, Honorable Patrick Boama. 10 minutes, because we are here to work and we are willing to work. We have nothing personal against the nominee. It's just a fundamental legal issue a leader has raised. So let's not, as it were, affect the cordiality and congeniality with which we have worked thus far. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't think 10 minutes to go into conclave and seek further clarification from Mr. Speaker and His Excellency the President will hit. Just 10 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
Do I have consensus on that?
Chairman, if you listened to me earlier, I requested for this. I said we should just have 10 minutes consultation. I only came in when that was kind of not respected. I did so. If you want to go back to the record, I couldn't have. That's when you even said that we should take a decision as a whole. I did. I said just 10 minutes consultation. I have nothing against the nominee, but we just want respect to the law.
He's asking whether we have a consensus on suspending and doing.
No, just 5 minutes consultation. I think so. 5 minutes.
Very well.
To the extent that we are making this call in good faith and we hope to maintain the good atmosphere, why not? To the extent that we mean well and we want to do so, why not?
We will discuss all that when. Yes, so the nominee will kindly excuse us. We will call you back, please. Thank you, Chairman. The communications authorities, NPAs, National Petroleum Authority, Ghana Cocoa Board, which is quasi-regulator, all those government has invested in them, and government has interest in them. So broad definition of interest, in my understanding, would mean that to the extent that government has invested public funds in those entities, it is in the interest of public and the interest of public enterprise operations for them to run efficiently and productively so that they don't become a drain on government budget again. So in that context, SIGA, state interest and governance authority, would have an oversight responsibility in respect of what they do, even though these entities would be under their relevant sector ministries. It's just like an analogy, just like auditor, Attorney General's office and Ministry for Labor and Ministry for Finance itself. We see that every entity they have oversight responsibility, over which they have oversight responsibility in terms of their financing. Public Ministry of Finance, for example, labor issues, legal issues. We see they still run their respective acts to play their oversight role in consultation and in collaboration with the relevant sector ministers. So this is not out of the way at all. Thank you, Chair.
And I believe that you would have your work cut out to you to properly define these rules to minimize the opportunity for conflict, because state interests are also defined in the law. And it says clearly shares, assets, debentures, securities, and other similar interests owned by the state and provided for by law, including ownership of other state entities. It doesn't say where government has invested in it. It means you automatically have oversight over those regulatory agencies when those interests are not defined in the manner contemplated in the law. It may mean that you are probably reading more into it than is there, but you would have to really properly define roles so that it is beyond any or doesn't generate any unnecessary conflict between you and either the agencies, regulatory authorities, or the sector ministry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Eric first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, most of the state-owned enterprises are performing below expectation, and some of them running into huge losses. According to the World Development Report, 18 state-owned enterprises in Ghana register annual losses of nearly 800 million Ghana cedis, almost $200 million US every year. But surprisingly, the chief executives of these enterprises earn salaries that is difficult to be accommodated by the Ghanaian economy. Some of them earn as much as 3 times the salary of the President of the Republic of Ghana. Deputy, I think that something must be done to ensure that salaries paid to these chief executive officers correspond to the performance of these state enterprises. What do you think must be done to rationalize this salaries that we pay to these chief executives?
Chair, with your leave, my colleague was referring to a report. I'll be happy if you can share the source.
Honorable, he is asked a question. Can they? That's right. You answer the question. Did you get the question? Can they answer the question?
Yes, Chairman, the honorable member is right to have observed that a lot of the state-owned enterprises are performing below, observing from report. So, Honorable Chair, the solution rests with what SIGA, I must say, is doing at the moment. Corporate governance structures that are being put in place. It's going to solve that problem because when proper corporate governance principles guide the running of these public enterprises, there will be alignment of interests. So far as shareholder, which is the state, is concerned, and then management of these state enterprises concerned, there will be alignment of their interests. Once that is achieved, then the objectives of these enterprises will also be achieved. Let me explain what I mean by this alignment of interest. Like rightly observed, when it comes to these state enterprises, so far as management is concerned, and it's the same everywhere, management will look for fat salaries and do nothing, look for large offices and enjoy the status, look for good cars, and then even expensive holidays at the expense of public investment in the enterprises they run. And until we put in place proper governance structures where the shareholders' interest, shareholder in this case government, and board which oversights the management, their interests, when we have a good corporate governance structure between management, board, and the shareholder, which is the state, then these things will be checked, and expenses they incur, which eat into their profitable operations, will all be checked. So let's, with this, in answering this, I call for support for this ministry, for public enterprises, and also for the authority SIGA, for us to keep, for the House Chairman to keep an eye on these public enterprises, else they will continue to drain the public resources like the way it has happened up to now. Thank you, Chairman.
Honorable Viama first.
Thank you, Chairman. Honorable nominee, congrats for your appointment. My first question will be on divestiture. During the PNEC period and up to 2001, the interest of the state in state-owned enterprises had been divested in close to 300 state-owned enterprises. During the period of the
MPP under President Kufuor, about 50 more were divested. Now, what lessons do you think we should learn from the divestiture, extensive divestiture, which was carried out within this period? Do you follow my question, please? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding of divestiture and the existence of Divestiture Implementation Committee has been one of a strategy that the state used to manage the very many defunct companies and those that were not doing well, so that they don't continue to be a drain on public resources. As per my understanding, some were completely divested of government ownership. I will cite an example. GREL, Ghana Rubber Estate Limited, in the Western region, went into complete private hands. Today, it is part of a wealth creation in that corner of the country, growing a lot of rubber trees and giving a lot of jobs to the people in the Western region. When it existed, Chairman, the company was just a drain on public place. As part of divestment of government ownership, some were put on Ghana Stock Exchange as a strategy, government retaining part of the ownership. And there, Honorable Chair, we can cite example of Ghana's GCB Bank today, which was Ghana Commercial Bank then. We know it today exists with government stake in it, and government receives dividend to support its expenditure. We can cite Ghana Oil, GOIL, which was, and today, as per 20 ranking, GOIL is listed as one of the 3rd best performing corporates in the country. We can look at SIC and also see that it's still in existence. Now, from all this, lessons that can be drawn, Mr. Chairman, is that if we keep holding on to these defunct state-owned enterprises like the Aboso Glass Factory, which is having an asset sitting there, Tomato Factory up north, which is also having an asset, and a lot of them, about 48 defunct assets. If we hold on to them, we don't gain anything, but if we divest of government ownership in them, whether part privatization or full privatization, we get them to join the assets in the economy that are productive and creating jobs and adding to prosperity of the nation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. My next question will dwell on the fact of whether you think there should be a government policy to acquire more state-owned enterprises or to divest state-owned enterprises and the implications of that.
Honorable Chair, that is a very interesting question. Government policy to acquire or to divest itself. I must say, to the extent that government has an objective to create prosperity and generate wealth for its citizens, they are the citizens of the country, both strategies work hand in hand, case by case, depending on the particular entity we are looking at in the particular market or industry the government is looking at, I would say that if we use, for example, the banking sector, where government has a presence, by way of GCB Bank, NIB, it's important in the sense that they become a check on the purely private enterprises in terms of transaction charges, presence in the sense that there are some parts of the country, Ghana, where some of the banks in Accra will never go because they are purely profit oriented. But GCB Bank, because of state interest in them, would combine profitability and service delivery, shared service delivery, and create branches there. So case by case, where government has to acquire a stake in a particular industry, a firm in a particular industry, to have a presence in there, it should be considered. And I will give general industries where it is in the interest of government to participate in those industries. Telecommunications services industry, banking industry, insurance industry, transport industry, the downstream energy industry, where you have GOIL participating as a state, as an entity with state interest in it. There are some specific industries where government should rather think of acquisition instead of complete divestment of its presence in that industry, and some industries where government should let the private sector do it the way they do it, better and profitably for those industries to exist, but with government supporting them in its effort to generate wealth and jobs for the citizenry. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Another word for divestiture is privatization. And people, especially those involved in that sector of research, believe that the fallout of privatization is huge. Loss of jobs, loss of revenue, worker agitation, corruption, effect on the economy. If you still think that government should pursue privatization, how do you think government should go about it to avoid some of these effects?
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I'm happy you highlighted privatization to explain divestiture. Sometimes it gets make it good we are using the term privatization because we are more familiar with it. And privatization, I must say, it can take place in a firm when a government has an interest in a firm, say 100% interest. It can privatize ownership, that is, sell shares, or privatize management, give management of the company on subcontracts, or even operations of the company. These three levels, Mr. Chairman, it is ownership privatization, where state divests itself of all the shares and doesn't put in any clauses of no job losses. Then it leads to job losses. But let's take a typical recent example we all are aware of for our understanding, the PDS ECG privatization. You know, government just made it clear that PDS cannot lay off any worker of ECG. And so that privatization, if it had continued, it wouldn't have led to job losses. So I must say not all privatization lead to job losses. And we should understand that such privatization sometimes is good because to the extent that the company is a drain on the public budget and denies government of the opportunity to use its funds to construct roads, deliver health services and so on, when the government divests itself of whether part ownership or full ownership, for example, Vodafone, the company rather exists for a long time to continue to give employment to Ghanaians, rather than not privatizing it and then the company becoming defunct, and rather naturally job gets lost. So it's a case-by-case issue, and I think we should support what government is doing now so that we can get the best out of the strategy it will roll out through the Ministry for Public Enterprises and SIGA to ensure that we achieve the result, the desired result we all want for the country. Thank you.
Very well. Yes, Giselle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, I see that your CV has about 6 references. I find that very interesting. I said your CV has about 6 referees. That's very interesting. That's a lot of endorsements. All right, let me just ask a question. On as a follow-up to Honorable Esler's question about your control, your span of influence from your designated Ministry of Public Enterprises vis-a-vis the conventional ministry, let's say, for example, transport. And I'll give an example of you're giving an example of state-owned companies, so I'll also give an example. Ghana Airports Company, which had a healthy balance sheet in 2016, to the extent that it even borrowed on its own balance sheet to be able to have the funding for Terminal 3 and so on and so forth. And then something just goes wrong, and then even before COVID, it is almost on its knees. How would you be able to reconcile what you should be able to practically, you have the law backing you all right, practically do to make sure that in your corner you are taking care, you have the oversight over the public enterprises, but the conventional or the traditional ministry also has its oversight, and then the board, the corporate governance system also has it, such that you don't have cases of a company being a tier 1, more or less labeled a tier 1 state-owned enterprise, and then about 2 years later it is almost, crying for help. How do you reconcile your position with such a scenario?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Ghana Airport Companies Limited borrowing on its own balance sheet to redevelop the airport. I think that is what we should all be supporting, that state enterprises on their own exist and operate profitably. That is the bottom line. For a company to operate profitably, the structures are there. But let me refer to the borrowing, which, in your opinion, Honorable Chair, has led to maybe your undesired perception of what happened there, so far as its operations now, if I understood your...
I was a board member, it's not a perception.
A reality. But I think that when corporate governance is working, that the state, which owns the asset, the company or the corporate, and the board, which oversights management. If the structure is working effectively, even the borrowing itself should be a subject matter of scrutiny. You know, let me put it this way, that there is no political interference and management is independent, board is doing its work as per its fiduciary responsibility, and the state as an owner has an eye on the operations of the company and everything is working well. Even the borrowing itself, in terms of pricing, in terms of the terms that the company is taking, the board will check and make sure that the borrowing will not lead to any losses for it to roll back to the state, which is the shareholder. And so let's ensure, as a House, Honorable Chair, let's ensure that we take keen interest in corporate governance over these public enterprises. We should take keen interest in it. That is where we can get the public enterprises running profitably to free the state resources. Thank you, Chairman.
Very well. Yes, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Joseph Cudjoe, congratulations. Honorable Cudjoe was one of my bosses at the Ministry of Energy, and I've worked very closely with him. Very diligent personality, and I have every confidence that you bring that diligence to your new portfolio. Just a quick reference to Section 29 of the SIGA Act on register. The authority shall establish, keep and maintain a register in the form determined by the board. And Section 2, Subsection 2 says the register shall include a list of specified entities and any other information on the board considers appropriate. I'm particularly excited about this because I've had some instances in my private practice. I was doing due diligence for an international company, mining firm, and they wanted evidence of the state's 10% interest, the shares, for filing purpose in their jurisdiction. Now, I went around everywhere, Minerals Commission, Ministerial of Lands, Natural Resources, everywhere. I couldn't find that share certificates. So I find this register, particularly revolutionary in the sense that it gives certainty and predictability to investors. Now, can you confirm whether this register is in existence? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You want confirmation if the register is in existence? Yes, SIGA is holding that register of the assets which the state has and keeps developing it and receiving reports on. I have cited a report done by KPMG validating the assets and other reports to that effect. But the experience you went through, trying to get evidence of the existence of government interest, the 10% interest. Let me take the opportunity to point to you the Section 3 of the SIGA Act again. Section 3C, where it states that the object of the authority, that SIGA, shall be to acquire, receive, hold, and administer or dispose of shares of the state in state-owned enterprises and joint venture companies. This clearly spells it out that when we support SIGA in respect of this object, you, when you were sitting at NPA, will not be the one trying to get evidence of state interest, but SIGA will be doing that on behalf of NPA, because it will be holding that register of state assets. And collectively we will all have an eye on what the state has in terms of investment it has made with public funds. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, just one last one. Section 35, and this one I'm just riding on the question that was put to you by Honorable Esla Oswekufo regarding the remits of SIGA. Now, my senior brother here, I don't know whether I can recognize him, Honorable Asabi is here. I've had running battles with him regarding whether or not NPA, was an agency that properly was, one that can be regulated by the SIGA. I think that there is need for some clarity, especially in the interpretation section 35, on specified entities. Means A, state-owned enterprise, B, a joint venture company, or C, other state entities. Now, the bone of contention, I believe, is on other state entities. That has not been defined. And I think that when you assume office, if this committee approves and the plenary agrees, to bring some kind of certainty and clarity to this particular provision, because Honorable Asabi, I believe, is fighting a battle, but the law doesn't help him much. Thank you very much.
Very well. Yes, Honorable.
Most grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my question will flow from the Honorable's at page 2, where he indicates that he was executive director of Daily Capital Microfinance Limited from February 28. And I've also listened to you attentively, been big about your private sector background and the public enterprises for profitability and productivity. But how will you respond to critics and skeptics that your background as executive director of Daily Capital Microfinance Limited is not inspiring and doesn't give us confidence about what you can do? I have here the Bank of Ghana examination report on your company, which, for the record, is one of 347 microfinance companies that was shut down by the Bank of Ghana. Your license was revoked on the 30th of May 2019. Daily Capital Microfinance, registration number 00161, operated at Takrady Unicom building near Anaji Trotro Station. You are listed here as a director and an 80% shareholder, together with Samuel Tewia, Gasimbwedi, Emmanuel Diaba, and Alexander Odoikwe Sakifio. The Bank of Ghana report indicates that you did not comply with the minimum capital of 2 million. You had only 300,000. The shareholders' funds equity was negative 1.1 million as of 31st December 2017. Non-performing loans was over 181,000. That's 84.28% of the gross credit. Company's adjusted capital adequacy ratio was negative 196.25% as of 31st December 2017. Loans written off without prior written approval from the Bank of Ghana. Company did not meet its statutory obligations of withholding payee and making SNIT payments on behalf of the staff of the company. the overall rating of Daily Capital Microfinance Limited was critical. The company was insolvent, and so your license was revoked. How do you respond to critics who say that, and justifiably so, that your private sector experience does not inspire confidence to, as it were, turn around public enterprises?
Thank you, Honorable Chairman. There are no critics, and there won't be. Everybody who knows Daily Capital Microfinance in the microfinance industry knows and have a lot of respect for that company. A lot of respect for that company. Revocation of its license, I must say that it's an accident that occurred. I call it an accident. And accident in the sense that Bank of Ghana itself had failed to update its records of reinvestment that the company had done and registered that investment. You know, Bank of Ghana had a published minimum capital requirement for microfinance enterprises, 2 million Ghana cedis. And even as it was building up to that minimum capital requirement, where I have been part of the consultation and helping the industry in a small way that I can attend in meetings and giving them helping the way with knowledge that we can. But when we saw the listing among those whose licenses have been revoked, I was shocked to the bone. I was shocked to the bone. I went to Bank of Ghana and asked, straight at the Banking Supervision Department, asked, why would Daily Capital Microfinance be part of that list? And they were also surprised. But they checked and they saw it in. And when they saw it in, they themselves said they will engage BOG to see if they would be able to reinstate it. I said, okay, so they went ahead in several meetings at the Bank of Ghana, as I know it, because they were informing me of the feedback from the meeting. They then advised they will not willingly reinstate it, so I should write a petition. Then I wrote a petition. Let me, with your chairman, with your indulgence, let me read just excerpts of the petition to throw some facts out there. We wrote in our petition to the governor, Central Bank through the Supervision Department. We highlighted the fact that the total assets of the company was 2.1 million. We had made the stated capital. We had met it. The total asset was 2.15 million, and total liabilities were 1.2 million. CDs, 1.29 million, almost 1.3 million. And the company liquidity reserves as at 31st May 2019 was 36% as against BOG minimum requirement of 30%. So it's not as at the date of revocation of the license. When you look at Daily Capital's financial position, I can go on and on. The capital adequacy position of the company as at 30th April 2019, with the injection of the additional capital, was 47.6% as against BOG minimum requirement of 15%. So you can go and in fact, the receiver, when his officers stepped in the office of Daily Capital in Takrady, and they looked into the books, and they even saw that we still have a lot of the cash balances at Car Bank of the company. We're even safe for every operation we could do. And fresh loans had even been given. A company that is not doing well, can it be approving loans? Fresh loans had been given. And so they were even surprised Daily Capital was in the list. But you and I are in politics, political exposure. I take it as political exposure. When, as per my personal understanding of the industry and the wrong things that were going on, somebody will walk in, open a kiosk and say it's a microfinance company. And when it closes down, there will be pressure on those operating clean, with a clean motive to help the system. Those things meant that I had to swallow that bitter pill to not create a situation where you push so much. I make a case. I push all this banking supervision as a Registrar General's office with all the things, the capitalization we have raised. I could make a legal case. But if daily capital is restored, the rest might point at it and think that because I'm a member of parliament and because my government is in power, that is why our license has been restored. So I got slow to push for restoration of the license. So it's not a case of a Cudjoe that cannot run a company well, or I've been a consultant in corporate restructuring and turnarounds, and I think that the credibility, I must say, is not questionable anyway.
So for further clarification, the petition you are referring to, did the Bank of Ghana reply to you? Because the updated status is what I am holding of the examination report. It is at variance to what you are telling this committee. Have you received any response from the Bank of Ghana?
If I say we, Daily Capital, as an investor in that, have not received any formal response. So I have just kept it. I've just kept it. If I say I've kept it like that, it's all because of the political exposure we all have. If you push in, somebody might think you are using your political position to get what you want. Thank you.
Yes. Honorable nominee, just some few follow-ups on the issue. The revocation of the license was in 2019. And you kept referring to, you wrote. Were you still the executive director as in managing director? Or you were referring to the company wrote?
I was a shareholder and a director, but a non-executive director.
So what I mean is that the writing, you know, so writing of letters are done by management or the board. That's what I want to know. You kept saying that I wrote. So I want you to clarify whether you wrote personally or the managing director of the entity wrote to the company, to Bank of Ghana.
Chairman, thank you. We, in the context as I use that, it's management. The company
management wrote.
Yeah, management wrote.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. And as at 2019, you were not the executive director. And in your CV, you have it there that 2008 to 2016. That was when you were in office as executive director, correct? Right. Now, you are saying that you were a shareholder of the company, correct? Or an investor? No, at the time that they revoked the license, were you an investor of the company, or you were a registered shareholder in terms of the records at Registrar General's Authority, Registrar General's Department?
A registered shareholder. Yeah.
Were you in control of the company?
Yes, in control.
Very well. As in majority shareholder?
Yes, as a majority shareholder.
Very well.
Yeah, actually an 80% shareholder and a director as well. You have said nothing about the Bank of Ghana examination report about you not paying SNIT to your staff, SNIT and payee to your staff. That is a very serious observation. How do you respond to that? Ghanaian workers are listening, and you are going to be leading workers at the public enterprises.
Yes, a very serious offensive that predates when we are done restructuring. You know, from time to time, banking supervision were doing on-site monitoring. And if you run a microfinance institution, you realize that the next microfinance institution that have a run on it result automatically as a run on you. Because that time regulation of the sector, because thank you.
Vice Chair, what are you doing? Let's stop all the commentaries. We're listening to the nominee, please.
I am speaking in respect of the question by Honorable Ablakwa.
The question was?
Credibility.
Honorable, please answer the question directly. There was a query or a finding that you did not pay your SNIT for your staff. What's your answer to that?
Okay, in that respect, I'm not the one not paying, but management. It came to my notice, and as a shareholder who sees their report, and I invested money in it for them to pay. So they did.
When it came to your notice, what action did you take as shareholders?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
When it came to your notice that your management had not been paying for the SNIT contribution for your staff, what action did the shareholders take in that respect?
Reinvestment, additional investment for me. It was operational challenge. They explained, so injection of capital was made to be able to restore the operation.
In the end, did they pay it off?
Oh yes, they paid.
That's all we want. So we move on.
Mr. Chairman, I want to come to an Article 284 question to the nominee. The nominee knows that Article 284 of the Constitution stipulates that a public officer shall not put himself in a position where his personal interests conflict or is likely to.
We're back in Parliament for the ministerial appointee nominee. For the ministerial vetting ongoing there, Joseph Cudjoe is being vetted for Public Enterprises Ministry. Let's take you back there.
The focus for coordination of government policy and government oversight through SIGA of the state-owned enterprises. Thank you.
Chairman, so you believe that SIGA in the current form that it is not capable of dealing with that unless a minister or a ministerial office is brought to bear on SIGA to be able to do that?
Honorable Leader, I think this question should not be addressed to him. Can they ask another question?
No, I'm asking because he is going there.
But he is not the one who created the ministry.
No, but I'm asking what role will he be playing differently from what SIGA will be playing? Because SIGA exists to do those things. And what role will SIGA he be playing differently from SIGA?
Honorable Chair, Parliament, including all of us here, passed the SIGA Act and made provision for creation of the ministry, and referred to the minister, like I said, 18 times in the Act. And so I presume that with the House having passed the Act, the House has established that there is a necessity for the minister to oversight SIGA as it stands now. Thank you.
Can you refer me to the relevant section of that Act that you are making reference to? That you claim said that we should create that ministry, and the reason why we thought that we should create that ministry.
You mean the relevant section that mentions the minister?
That said we should create a ministry.
Section 35, Honorable Chair. In this act, unless the context otherwise requires, it goes on, annual performance contract means minister, a minister means the minister designated by the president to be responsible for the authority. That is this.
It didn't say we should create minister for public, because it's saying that the minister that the president designates to play an oversight on the authority. And you know that there have been instances 10 years.
No.
5 years.
No.
3 years.
I think about two. It won't be up to 3. Yeah.
And in the agreement, the rental agreement that you have, which ordinary most of us will have, if you are going to re-rent a property that I rent to you, I need to be in the know. In that agreement that you had, this clause was not there.
I haven't checked the details of the agreement because I wasn't the one that did the rental. An agent that all those.
You gave it to an agent who gave it out, but you didn't look at that because you have to sign the agreement on behalf of the owner.
I didn't sign. I think the property is jointly owned between my wife and myself. So
your wife signed?
Yeah, I didn't have the time to.
And she didn't check to be sure that that clause is there, so that now crowd powership could also further rent it to another person and you'll not be interested. All you know is that somebody is renting your property, and that's okay.
The most important thing is for a credible person who is renting the property.
That's the way the problem is, because if they are renting it out to criminals, then without recourse to you, you will not know. You only come to realize that criminals are living in your property. And when they go and commit crime, it may end up with you. And that's why maybe you should have been interested in who rents, who occupies it at every point in time. Or you don't think that is fair?
I must comment on this, that the fact of seeing car power presence did not raise any issue for me because I think that it was a credible company in the country. It's not like Cape Logistics rented it out to some armed robbers gang. And
when you saw the car powership vehicle there, you said it made you to inquire, right?
Yeah.
And you realized that some of their staff were living there.
Found out that some of
the car powership staff were there.
Exactly.
And you didn't find the details because you then knew that this company works under your ministry. And if you find their vehicle and staff living there, didn't that raise an alarm for you to inquire further?
Not at all, because I haven't dealt with car power.
Oh, what was interested? You interested that you've gotten the money and that's all.
I haven't dealt with car power in any way, so it didn't raise any alarm for me.
I'm done.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Nominee, congrats. Just 2 questions. Before and after the passage of Act 990, before and after, do you get the sense that we are being led as a country onto a new path in terms of in the context of what we want to achieve as the Act envisages?
Yes, very much so, because the problems are clear. State-owned enterprises are running losses. They are highly indebted. There's fragmented oversight. We all know the problems. And this is the first time the president has had the vision of focusing on their performance and making sure that they do not continue to be a drain on the public purse. So before and after, I think we are on a new path. Thank you.
The last one is, the creation of SOEs, do you see any SOE that in its true sense could be described as a model for us to emulate?
Thank you. I think that GOIL, in my view, especially when it was one of the companies operating under the Ministry of Energy, where I was a deputy minister, GOIL to me comes as a model for us to emulate. You look at Ghana Club 100, 2019, the current edition, GOIL is third on the corporate Ghana list of high-performing companies. I think so. Thank you.
Yes. Honorable nominee, pay attention to my questions. Car Power, at the time you assumed office as a deputy minister, government had already signed a contract with them, correct?
Yes, so.
And that contract preceded this administration, the MPP administration, that you became a deputy minister for that sector.
Exactly so.
There was no such schedule involving Car Power that you were involved at all. Is that correct?
Not directly involved. As a deputy minister in the ministry, you are sometimes called into Car Power relocation meetings. So, to that extent.
But there was no such additional contract that you were involved regarding the operations?
No, because Car Power, falls under the falls under power subsector, and Honorable Orek was in charge of power, so he was.
So I'm just trying to get it clear that the company that rented an asset of yours, or an asset that you had an interest in, did not disclose to you that it was also going to assign its rights in that tenancy or lease to another third-party entity.
Evidence suggested that's coming to reside in the assets.
And you couldn't have reasonably assumed so, correct?
I couldn't have at all.
Okay. Now, on your CV, you indicated that between 2008 and 2016, you were the executive director of a microfinance company. Meaning that from 2017, or from the time you were appointed as a deputy minister, you ceased to be in charge of management.
Exactly so.
Now, on the board, were you the chairman of the board?
No, please, I wasn't the chairman.
So it couldn't have been that at the management level and at the board level, you could have reasonably gone into the day-to-day management of the company, including the payment of taxes and SNIT and all that, correct?
I couldn't have been part of the day-to-day running. Thank you.
Now, as a shareholder, is it your case that it was the board and management that brought to your attention that the license of the company had been revoked?
Yes. To a large extent, I saw the name in newspapers and called, and then they also expressed shock, and that brought it to my knowledge.
Well, Honorable Muntaka has suggested strongly to you to take a legal action in respect of the seeming irregularities in the decision of Bank of Ghana, which decision was brought to your attention by your board. Would you want to pursue that? Though you have not, but would you want to explore that?
Honorable, that question has been answered. He has opted not to. You don't need to repeat it.
I won't repeat that. Do you think that there will be the need to pursue those rights?
Who knows the future? This is a case that I think the records are there. So if my right to exercise or not to exercise.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes,
Chairman, I should thank you very much. The nominee is my neighbor at Bubuashi, but I understand that I won't have too much for him because of the very clarity I sought. I can only come under the understanding that your mandate is to supervise as minister, as I'm made to understand it for now, State Interest and Governance Authority Act. So you may be working with this legislation known as Act 990. I do know that state-owned enterprises are either wholly owned or partially owned by government, and in many instances to run commercial activities on behalf of government. I still find your portfolio nebulous because if you take, for instance, National Health Insurance Authority as an entity, it is still supervised by a Minister for Health. If you take SNIT, pensions, it's still supervised by a Minister of Finance or a Minister responsible for employment. Therefore, mine will be to caution you that you will have to hasten slowly. Other than that, you will walk into a turf war and a turf battle with almost every other ministry or department of state. But what I'm made to understand is you have an onerous duty to improve the performance of state-owned enterprises. How do you intend to walk the talk on that matter? Because many of them are operating below expectation. Many of them, there is no justification even for the state to continue to invest in them. That itself. So today, we are entrusting you with a portfolio that you are the only person tomorrow who can assure us that don't privatize this entity. It is capable of doing well. Share your plans with me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I must say that already there is SIGA that is oversighting the businesses, and I use the word businesses as per the understanding of the word business. If you cite the NHI as you said, yes, it's under Health Ministry as an agency, but the state investment in it, if state wanted to operate efficiently, can be oversighted by another entity.
Honorable Minister, is health insurance an enterprise? I think the underlying word should be enterprise. Is it set up as a business entity?
It's set up as a service provider. A service provider. So I'm saying as a service provider, in terms of its operation, there is the need for it to operate efficiently and productively. And that is the responsibility of the Ministry for Public Enterprises, which makes it distinct from oversighting the health issues of that entity. Thank you.
Chairman, as I've indicated, I have a difficulty. You've just cited the example, national health insurance. You see, under the law, the minister by regulation is supposed to define entities, state entities. That has not been done. Not until that is done, I am not able to understand or appreciate or conceive your mandate. Now, two, if you come to your functions, for instance, that you are supposed to play a role under Section 4F, assist the minister responsible for finance to assess borrowing levels of state-owned enterprises, borrowing levels, within the meaning of the Public Financial Management Act 921. So tomorrow, VRA wants to borrow. Are you suggesting that VRA must consult you and not the Minister for Energy?
In fact, not even Minister of Energy when VRA want to go and borrow. It will be Minister of Finance under the Public Financial Management Act through the Ministry of Energy or through the Minister of Energy. So in the current arrangements, SIGA will play an advisory role through my ministry if you approve of me to work. So it's the same arrangement of consultation and collaboration to facilitate the work of the government.
Chairman, just to end it here, so I can't ask you further questions. It means that your ministry is likely to be a source of policy confusion and governance confusion because your mandate cut across many state enterprises that already have dedicated ministries and ministers. Therefore, when you say SNIT, what have you got to do with SNIT? Throughout, we know that there is a Minister for Finance or a Minister for Employment that supervises pension to ensure post-work income security. Now, can you just name 5 entities in your mind, 5, that you are likely to supervise? State entities, 5. Can you name 5? Other than SNIT and other than National Health Insurance Authority? Just name 5 other entities you contemplate you will be exercising supervision over.
Chairman, first, permit me to remark that it is very harsh. The honorable friend would describe the ministry as Ministry of Confusion. I don't know what exists at the back of his mind when Attorney General's office that also oversight several in matters of legal issues across all ministries, or labor where you were a minister and having all labor issues across several state entities and you. I don't know whether you were that led confusion in your role as Minister for Employment and Labor Relations because you were dealing with almost all state enterprises when matters of labor came up.
Just to respond to him, for instance, I have Minister of Employment here. This is a reading from handed over. It says, the ministry by executive instrument EI 28, January 17, is mandated to formulate policies on employment and labor issues, develop sector plans, coordinate sector-specific interventions, promote harmonious labor relations, and workplace safety. You see, so there is clarity with a mandate here. Yours, I don't seem to understand. So, Chairman, I'll end it here. Thank you. I don't seem to understand what the Ministry for Public Enterprises will do. Thank you, Chair.
Very well. I will only suggest to you that you should focus on entities that were set up as businesses. Business, not those that are set up as service providers in that area. Right, that's my only advice. We wish you well. You will hear from us. You're discharged.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Honourable members, it's 4 o'clock. We will resume at 4:30. to continue with the last ministry.
That has been the vetting of the Public Enterprises Minister, Joseph Cudjoe. Key issues that have come up, his own involvement in private sector, and whether or not it gives him enough credibility to man this particular position. There was issues about SNIT payment of his company that wasn't done. Also about the legal backing of the position as well that they've been talking about. You heard Haruna Idrisu make the point that he might end up interfering with other ministries, which they ended with Joe Wise, the chairman of the committee, indicating that he should focus on enterprises or state-owned enterprises set up as businesses. We're starting the pause right after this break. I am Gifty and up here.